Thunder rolled across the open plain. In the distance the couple could see the mountains towering with a halo of lightning. The road beneath them was tattered from roadside bombs. Years of repair and maintenance gave way to years of neglect and abuse. The country road surrounding them was scorched from prairie fire. What remained of grasses and fields of plenty would soon succumb to desertification. They hummed along the lonely broken highway in a dark rusty electric hybrid. These days no living soul would be adventurous enough to be out in the killing fields, but the conditions were right to take flight. In the distance they could see smoke of New Calgary. The smell of putrid decay of that tent city could be detected for miles. Siobhan turned to look upon her old love. She smiled, thinking, wishing to be with him in some better circumstance. In another time, or space. Horton just kept his eyes on the road. He felt her stare. He smiled on the inside, but on the exterior his face was emotionless. Horton had been in the army for the last several years overseas. Until everything went sideways. He had done things he was not proud of, seen and heard strange things. He had waited his whole life to experience those paranormal things, then regretted it. Most of all he was haunted by the voices, the whispers, the murmurings of something he could not comprehend. Siobhan had been a war vet counselor stationed in Halifax. She had never been overseas but knew what had taken place. The world had gone to shit, just overnight it seemed. They had both seen it coming, the storm of all storms. They were the few, but not proud. That night the couple huddled together for warmth, too afraid to light a fire, too afraid to spend the night in the hybrid. They feared the civilians, or what was left of them. Within a 5-year span, it seemed culture had returned to a feudal barbarism. They sat half hunched over in the foothills of the mountains, under a ripped tarp in the remains of a small shack. Siobhan giggled to herself, as a flash of memories took her to a happier place, a better time. She spoke in a low tone, like how she started to talk to a patient. "Do you remember when you wanted to live in a hole?" "Yes, a hole," mumbled Horton. Siobhan contorted her face, that of discomfort. "You wanna just live here?" she said in a sincere sarcasm. Horton knew the reference and laughed calmly. "I was thinking of some deeper hole, with the comforts of a home. Maybe on some distant planet or the moon," Horton said. Siobhan's sarcastic face turned to that of surprise. "You still can't seem to keep your head out of science fiction, can't you?" "No, not really," Horton replied in a sullen tone. "I was thinking that when we reach the coast, do you think the United Nations rescue ships will still be headed for the American refuge city of Tokyo?" said Horton with a hint of pessimistic realism. "I hope so, or else we will have to live in this hole," replied Siobhan with a hint of optimism. The next afternoon they reached the mountains. They both tried to forget the events of the morning, the rude awakening, the melee, the blood. Horton had killed several civilians with his hands and a piece of 2x4. Horton had been injured and was driving with one hand. Siobhan set a makeshift splint and cast. They were a team again. The afternoon sun rose over the mountains, pouring out warmth over the cool mountain air. Horton shivered and nodded. Siobhan made him pull over the hybrid so she could drive. "Better safe than sorry," she said in an authoritative voice. After all, Siobhan was the better driver. Horton had been reprimanded by his superior officer for driving carelessly in the Afghanistan foothills. This was only the latest of his driving follies. He reached in the back seat and grabbed the first aid kit. He pushed the plunger of the syringe down and felt no more pain. He pushed the plunger of the syringe down and felt no more pain. Siobhan did not notice Horton's lack of will and judgment. They reached Hope in good time. They had the hybrid charging at the deserted gas station when a lone man came stumbling up the road. The man was yelling incoherent chatter through a loudspeaker. The only words comprehensible were gibberish about robot alien invaders. Horton quickly grabbed a fire extinguisher and ran towards the man, ready to smash his face. Siobhan yelled at him to stop, but it was too late. Horton struck the man down. This action triggered an unseen chain of events. He was not a man but a sentinel. The sentinel lay twitching and sparking on the ground. Siobhan and Horton rushed out of town, without a fully charged hybrid, fearful of the alarm triggered by the dying sentinel. Siobhan screamed at Horton, but he was a drug-induced moron. The pain should have kept his guard up, but he had dulled it hours earlier. They flew around the curves of the mountain pass, dangerously, and barely avoiding the guardrails that protected their car from the treacherous slopes below. Several days later they reached the coast. They had been chased by the unseen menace of invisible sentinel drones. The chase lasted until they ditched all their metal, hybrid car, clothes and personal belongings. They hiked on foot through forests and valleys, avoiding roads. Horton had kept one thing, the thing he always kept close. A small piece of parchment. He gave it to Sivan. She read it aloud as they searched the horizon for the ship to safety. As Sivan read the parchment, they wept for the last time, together. As I sit, lonely and afraid, surrounded by the thought of you as my barricade, stronger than wood, rock and steel. Our love is the only thing that is real.